This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
Here we are, another edition of Power Lunch in the off season.
Here we are. This is maybe a record for length of show in a season when we were not like playing hockey in July, in August, which happened in 2020.
How many have we done? 5 or 6? Has to be.
You're talking about cumulatively, or
no?
Well, we were going every week
in the summer, right? Yeah.
During the playoffs.
We took last week off. I think.
Well, there's stuff to talk about, and the demand from the fans has just been outstanding and overwhelming.
Give the people.
I'm a little tongue in cheek on this, but yeah, there's still stuff to talk about, and a few of you are still tuning in, so thank you for that. Maybe more than a few.
I would say thousands at this point.
Steve told me, and I think he's told you too, that our numbers last year for Power Lunch, when the Lightning were playing, let's use that as a qualifier, reach new heights. So Thank you to the fans.
We always love
fans
that.
and the ones that have been listening / watching from the days when we were wearing masks and stuff,
for sure.
Except when we were on the air.
We always appreciate that, and everybody has. You get this a lot in today's digital media, particularly with a lot of podcasts on there, and a lot of people younger people will ask about. They'll come to me if they're in broadcasting. I'm sure you get the same question. You're like, how do you really cut your teeth into this field, and what are some of the things that you suggest, and what makes podcasts successful? There's a lot of different answers with that. I think with technology today, most people, if they want to, can do it. Any type of show, we know that. But I will tell you, the ones that are semi-successful, you got to stay with it. And I bring it back to what we do, and obviously we're going to be doing this on a day-to-day basis once the season starts. But there is something to be said for putting out consistent content, partner. And I do think people in the podcast space, the ones that end up having a decent following, are the ones that stick with it, because it doesn't happen overnight. You have to say something interesting. You've got to be relevant, find ways to interact with your audience for sure. But it seems like a pretty simple plan to follow, but you'd probably be surprised at how many people don't. And I forget what the magic number is. They had done a few studies, meaning whatever is out there in the social media space. Like once you get past 25, 26 podcasts, if you're doing it pretty consistently, you feel like you've got a pretty good base of what you're going to be doing content-wise and maybe your audience. And then it gives you a chance to grow.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've obviously have a huge platform. We've done that. A lot of people have helped along the way. But I do think, even having content in the off season is something that you need to be cognizant of. Not everybody does it.
We have built-in content, Greg, because, maybe less since the Lightning got eliminated. But even then, there was still some content. That's why we went to weekly and not every day. But when the season is going on, we kind of have topics du jour every day. The Lightning played last night. Let's talk about what happened. The Lightning are playing tonight. Let's preview that. The Lightning are in between days, maybe. We can bring in a guest to talk about kind of the temperature in the pool and which direction the team is going. And are we feeling good about this? Are we feeling a little concerned about this? There is a rhythm to a season. It's not quite like baseball, which plays every day, but there's enough of a rhythm playing 3 to 4 times a week that doing a show like this, we're never going to run out, I think, of things to talk about, even though we're on basically every day.
Right.
And I think other podcasts, maybe you're kind of looking for ideas. We're talking more like hypothetically, or you're exploring like puzzles of the mind. Let's come up with a topic for today, or whatever the case might be. If you're actually dealing with real life events, which sports are real life events.
Sure.
There's stuff happening. There's new material every day. I think it makes it a little smoother to do what you described, which is sticking with it and having some consistency to your programming.
And it takes an audience to want to interact. We're
Yeah.
going to do that. The schedule was released, the
Yeah.
regular season, so we can get into anything that we saw that was a bit unusual. I know a lot of people like to circle certain dates, partner, and
Of course.
what makes sense, any rivalry games that are interesting, and key matchups, and then breaks in the schedule for a variety of reasons, whether it's the Olympics, Christmas break, which is typically that December 22nd to the 27th. You have a game on the 22nd, and then a game coming back on the 27th.
Sometimes the 23rd.
Sometimes the
Lightning have played
23rd.
on the 23rd before.
They have. So
we also wanted to allocate this, and this is probably going to be our final show until training camp. But
Yeah.
we wanted to allocate time for questions, and we got some in. So
For sure.
we'll address those.
we will get to those because there is a lot at Bolts Radio. So let's start with the schedule.
Sure.
And I know as somebody who travels with the team, and obviously you're more in tune with what you're seeing. Anything stick out for you? Back-to-back games always are highlighted, and things like that.
So a few things, and I confess I've not really looked at the schedule particularly closely, although the Lightning did a press release. They always do a press release accompanying the schedule, so some of the things are broken down in the press release. So I think I read they have 15 back-to-backs this year. That is a bit on the high end. I mean, they're not excessively high, but I think in the past few years we've been looking at like in the 12 to 13 range, and is usually the case for the Lightning. Most of those back-to-backs are road. They have a few where one of the games might be at home, and there might be one or two where they play both games at home. In fact, I'm looking at one right now. Early in the season, they play a Saturday and a Sunday at home, both in late October. Those are rare. Usually it's road. So if we want to look at some areas of the schedule that might be relative to other years more challenging or just different, there are a few things that jumped out at me. One is that number 15 back-to-backs. The thing that I noticed, I feel like in a lot of years, the Lightning just have a sprinkling of games where it's just a one-gamer. They're going to a location, playing one game, and then coming home. Most of the time, they're playing, obviously, more than one game at a time on the road, but usually there are a fair number of two-game trips. Like they might go up and they might play, I don't know, Pittsburgh and Philly and then come home. Or they might go and play, Dallas and St. Louis and come home. I mean, I'm just using those as an example. If they're going farther distances, usually it's more than two. As I'm looking at the schedule, Greg, I only see one trip of two games. In January, they play, and it's a back-to-back, at Chicago, at Columbus. Actually, they're losing an hour in that back-to-back, but I don't think the distance is particularly, onerous going from Chicago to Columbus. So what that means is that all of the other road games are either one-gamers or more than two-game trips. And I think they have more one-gamers than they usually have. There's an at Nashville in here. There's an at Washington in here. At Florida, at Carolina. What did I just give you? 4? And then 2 at Florida. So that's 5 single game, one game trips. And, the Washington one is a little farther, but, that I think is a little bit on the high end. But what I noticed more than just the single gamers and the lack of 2 game trips is longer trips. So most of the Lightning's road trips this year are 3, 4, or in one instance, 5 games long. And I don't know if you feel that that's good or not good. I'm not sure I can make a proclamation about like 4-game trips are worse than having 2-game trips, let's say.
Yeah.
But I think this year more than other years, the Lightning are going to be away. When they go away, they're going to be away longer and play more games. And then when they are at home, and there are a couple of instances of this, they have longer homestands. They have a 6-game homestand, and then they have a 7-game homestand. 13 of their home games are going to be fit into 2 different stretches where they play 6 in a row at home and then 7 in a row at home. I can tell you Phil is not a big fan of long homestands, more from an interest in like filling the building standpoint. That's not really an issue for the Lightning anymore. Like when Phil was, running the team, he had to worry about selling a lot of single game tickets every single game. And if you play like 6 home games in 2 weeks, that's a lot of hockey for people to come out and buy tickets. I don't know that that's really necessarily the case this time around, but these are elements that are a little bit different. The last thing I noticed is there are a fair number of afternoon games, or at least earlier start games. And we probably have fans who are really on top of this, and they're going to like, well, this is actually comparable to what we've seen in some other years. To me, it feels like it's a higher number. And I just mentioned those 2 home games the Lightning have in a back-to-back at the end of October. Both are at 5 o'clock. So, I mean, there's some 1 o'clock games, 2 o'clock games, 4 o'clock games. At Dallas, 2 o'clock. The 2 Boston games they play at Boston are both in the afternoon. So those are some of my general takeaways. But at the end of the day, Greg, no matter what the schedule is, the good teams find ways to do well, and the teams that struggle. Right? I mean, the Lightning aren't saddled with 22 back-to-backs. I mean, it's 15. Sure. It's a little bit more. So there are going to be some scheduled lost games in there. Like every year, there are going to be some games where the Lightning are at home and tired teams are coming in, just like every year.
I think everybody looks at the back-to-back games. I think those are always intriguing. Mm-hmm. What was the one-year partner they had more than typical? Was it like 17 or 18? Maybe more than that? Forget what year that was, but it felt like it was a big talking point.
Well, the one year where they played within the conference, there were just a lot of back-to-backs for every team, but they were usually in the same city. Maybe that's what you were thinking about.
Maybe.
And both teams were in the same boat because they were playing each other.
Obviously the big break in February. And
yes,
I think
there's that too.
Does that negate any of the conversations about teams being fatigued? At least for this year, when you talk about that big of a break. Now, not everybody, obviously, is going to be resting. You're going to have guys playing. And we get that in the Olympics. Mm-hmm. But that's, for most of the players, you're going to get a nice break.
Yeah.
Now, how you manage the players that are playing, that's always the challenge. And, of course, the Lightning are led by their superstars, and they're participating. So I think that is going to be one of those things.
Save the Russians.
Yeah,
and you're going to have 2 Russian players at least, that
correct.
I don't know if there's another
and that's
Russian
a good point.
Going to pop in here at some point, but Kucherov and Vasilevsky would be playing in the Olympics.
So that's a good point.
We're involved. So they're going to get a break. Ed Encina actually had this in his breakdown of the schedule, which is interesting. So it's kind of a twofold concern, if that's the right way of putting it. One is the Lightning may have healthy participation in the Olympics. And we had this conversation with the Four Seasons last year. What is it going to do to the players in terms of wearing them down for the stretch run? And I think those are fair comments to make and fair questions to ask. For the Lightning specifically, they come out of the Olympic break and what is it? They play 9 of 14 on the road. And the schedule is going to be fairly condensed down the stretch because they just had a 3-week break.
Sure.
So I know we are going to be dealing with a lot of questions on this show, probably leading up to the Olympics and coming out of the Olympics.
Right.
And how are the Lightning going to handle what is going to be a fairly rigorous schedule? Not quite like January last year. That was just, that was insane, in my opinion. The 14 games in 24 days, 10 on the road, all different time zones, etc. I'm not sure this is that, but I would call that a difficult stretch of the schedule that is coming on the heels of the Olympic break, which for the players who are not participating in the Olympics, they're probably fine with that. But how many Lightning players are going to be involved in the Olympics? Flying to Europe.
Fair.
It's in Italy.
Yeah, it's fair.
So
it's a fair point.
Yeah.
So the majority of players will be okay, but what's interesting, this is, in my opinion, a league driven by your stars. At least it should be. Your star players are the ones that you're going to be leaning on in high impactful moments, particularly in the playoffs. Now, the Lightning may have, quote-unquote, lightning in a bottle with Kucherov and Vasi a little more fresh than some of the other players, but this is what the players wanted. I think most people like Olympic hockey and are willing to look at this and say, okay, disrupt the schedule, and let's see what happens. But I do think collectively it will be something to watch in terms of how are you managing these star athletes when they do come back. And for the remaining part of the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And are the Lightning going to be so up against the cap partner they can't do anything? Kind of like we saw towards the end of last year. Remember, that was an interesting talking point.
But as we speak right now, they are not up against the cap.
Right.
I'm
so that
actually
that
gonna
point,
look at it and see
that
what they're at and who Puckpedia is including in the roster right now.
So I guess what I'm saying is that's a very positive potential development. And if it's the case, does that give John Cooper a little more leeway to sit there and strategically rest guys a bit more as the season comes to an end? And there's a lot of factors to that, as we know. Are you fighting for a playoff position, or are you firmly entrenched where you are? And this is about resting players as much as you can, kind of like we saw with some other teams last year. And I think, Dave, I think the Lightning are at a point in their journey as an organization with this core group of players that I don't know how anybody else feels, but I do think within reason, load management, player management is a bigger factor with this team than somebody else. And it should be, because this window has been open for so long. There's only so many things you can do to move the needle in a positive direction, because we've talked about replenishing the minor league system, developing players. That kind of comes and goes depending on what you've done previously to empty the tank and win now. There's a trade-off with that type of thinking. And we've talked about the Lightning have done a pretty good job recently here, the last couple of years, of finding a few players who can come up and potentially elevate the team in a way we haven't seen in a little bit. But I also think being able to manage your star players in a way that allows for rest and recover is a bigger deal now, with this window being still open, with this core group of players competing for a championship year in and year out, than in years past. So I do think that is something to look out for, and I know I'm going to be following it. Just curious to see, with less restriction maybe on the cap for John Cooper to work with, is that something they take a look at a little bit more and say, if I have to rest Hetty for a game, I'm going to, or a Braden Point here and there, and a Brandon Hagel who was banged up pretty good, even a Sorelli, at that point, McDonough, I think these are things that are key components.
Well, I think anybody who played in the Four Nations, who was a member of the Lightning last year, is going to be playing in the Olympics, unless something weird happens. Right. Maybe they get hurt, they can't go. They use that time to rest and recover. And then you're going to have additional players. Yeah. Like Oliver Bjorkstrand.
Right.
May go and play for Denmark. I think Denmark is in the Olympics. Moser going to play for Switzerland, right? Yes. So we're going to see additional players go. But that's going to be true across the board throughout the NHL. Where countries are competing, more players are going to go. I think, though, that so many of the Lightning's top guys are going to be playing, and you would figure playing fairly deep into the Olympics, that we're going to see what their energy level is like coming out of the Olympic break into that stretch where it's very road heavy and a fairly condensed schedule as well. I did look it up. The Lightning, according to Puckpedia, have $1.18 million in open cap space, which is a lot more. Honestly, it is a lot more than what they had last year. Now, and that includes 23 players, which they went most of last year without 23 players on the active roster. Now, they do have like Peltier and Kachuk on there. People might be like, well, what if they don't make the team? The fact that they have 23 on there, I think anybody who is on that list who is not going to be one of the 23 will be replaced by somebody who's making comparable money. Yeah. So it may not be exactly $1.18 million in open cap space, but that's your ballpark. Yeah. And, if the Lightning can find a way to go a little bit of time with 22 or 21, they may try and do that again. If they're healthy, particularly at the start of the year, that number can increase. Actually, they can build a little bit more cap.
What was
space.
Last year?
But they're just in a different position than they were last year, where they had
$5
hardly any room at all. Yeah.
That was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But that's different year. And
different
let's see if the Lightning could potentially use that to their advantage. You want to get some questions here with the remaining 40 minutes of our show
Yeah,
at
let's
Bolts
do it.
Radio. Got a few here. George. And again, some of these came in, a couple of days ago, a little longer. This one was yesterday, partner. Do either of you know when the prospect showcase is? I loved rookie camp, but I'm ready to see some play with other teams. Other than
I
us.
do, because Steve Verstink and I just had this conversation yesterday talking about kind of leading up to training camp. So the tournament that George is referring to, the prospect tournament, is that what he called it? Or did he call it the rookie showcase?
Yeah, I think the rookie showcase. Yeah.
It is basically a rookie showcase. So it's basically the prospects. But these prospects, many of them are going to end up coming to training camp. So the college players prospect showcase is the name of it. Thank you, Steve. So they are prospects, but it's not all prospects. Like these college guys that we saw earlier in the month are going to be in school. Mm-hmm. But the Lightning, what George is talking about, the Lightning don't just play each other. Like it's not just a camp where it's like internal competition. There are 4 teams that participate in this showcase. It's the Lightning, it's the Panthers, Nashville, and Carolina. And the host location rotates. This year, the Lightning are the host location. So the 4 teams with their prospects are going to come to Tampa, and I believe the games are going to be at Wesley Chapel. And it's going to be the weekend of the 13th, 14th. I know that because the 13th is my birthday. So Steve said the Lightning, I think, play the 12th, 13th, and 15th. I may have those days not quite right, but that's the range. And then it's not just – so the Lightning will have a game each against Nashville, Carolina, and Florida. But the other teams will also play each other. So you can – if you're really interested, you can head up to Wesley Chapel and almost see like – I don't know. It's like the NCAA basketball tournament. You get to see one game after the other, if you're up for it. But that hopefully answers your question, George. And then once that tournament ends, it bleeds basically right into the start of the main training camp.
Yeah.
A couple of days later.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing this name correctly. Gilly Vanilli or Jilly Vanilli. It's like, what do you think will be the most challenging and or critical stretches of the Lightning's schedule next year?
Well, I think we mentioned coming out of the Olympic break, what did I say, 9 out of 14 on the road? And you're into the home stretch at that point. Like you're getting into the trade deadline, jockeying for position. If you're in a comfortable spot, if you're not, you got to move up the standings. I mean, again, I didn't look particularly closely at the schedule, but I mean, the Lightning have a 5-game trip that's a fairly long trip in January. Starts January 10th and ends January 18th, so it's over a week. But I don't know. I mean, we'll probably get into the challenging back-to-backs when they pop up.
Mm-hmm.
And some back-to-backs are more challenging than others. So, for example, I'm just looking here, coming out of the Thanksgiving, it's not even a break, but coming out of Thanksgiving, the Lightning play on Black Friday, 1 o'clock in Detroit, and then they play Saturday, November 29th, 2 p.m. at the Rangers. That's a back-to-back. That's not a tough back-to-back. I mean, the Lightning will get into New York at a very reasonable hour. So, yeah, they're playing back-to-back, and both games are in the afternoon, but the travel is not as tough as it would be if they were playing, let's say, 7 o'clock in Detroit and then 6 p.m. against the Rangers the next night, because it would be a weekend, let's say. And then there are probably other back-to-backs that are more difficult.
Matt says, keep seeing a dumb rumor that we might be trading McDonough. No, it's more than likely fake, but would like your take on it. Personally, think it would be a dumb move considering how great he played.
Yeah,
speculation.
The likelihood of that is almost zero. I say almost because what do I know? I mean, I'm not involved in any of those conversations. Julian Breezeball said they want to re-sign Ryan McDonough, but Julian said, essentially, he said, we want to see where we are as a team at the end of this year. So he said, quote, I talked to Ryan's agent, said we're going to wait the year. We're going to see where we are as a team after this year. McDonough is entering the final year of his contract.
You wonder if, I have no data to support this, more of the eye test. Are you more likely as an organization willing to pay somebody a little bit more and have more term who's up there in age, more at the defense position than at the forward position. And I say that because I think the minute you just brought that up with Ryan McDonough, my initial thought was, well, of course they're going to bring him back. I don't think his play has declined. And worst case, if you think Ryan McDonough's play is dipping, you could still see him playing in a third pairing role and still be solid. Goes out there on a PK and gives you 10 to 12 minutes, and does some things. Whereas, let me use the example partner of, and they wanted to sign him, and I know that's the asterisk we have to use there, like a Steven Stamkos, who's more of a forward, somebody who scores a lot, probably is only as effective being in the top 6 and on your power play. When those players and their skills start to erode, there's less of a chance you keeping them long-term to find a place for them other than where they were positioned. Whereas I think defensively, if I can still play at a decent level, I might not be a top 4 defenseman anymore. But if you sign me for 4 more years and said, okay, probably towards the end of that deal, you're going to be somebody that just goes out there on the PK and plays 10 to 12 minutes, it feels like teams are more inclined to swallow that than they are dealing with the after effects of a scorer whose play has declined, and it's harder to find a role for them.
Well, it depends on the player. I mean, I'm going to use this guy as an example because if you had said that he would be where he is at today 3 years ago, I would have been surprised. Corey Perry. I mean, Corey Perry looked like when his final year ended with the Lightning, he looked like a guy who was honestly at the end of his career, a great career, tremendous, we'll say borderline Hall of Fame career, lengthy career, and very productive career. But late 30s, never the fastest guy to begin with. And so, remember, Chicago signed him in part because they were like, we got Bedard, we want a veteran guy, to kind of, and Corey Perry had that reputation having that effect with Cole Caulfield when he was in Montreal. And things didn't work out in Chicago.
Sure.
I don't have the details of exactly what happened, but they decided to part ways, and Edmonton was like, let's just pick this guy up and see if he can help us. And boy, did he help Edmonton.
Very
both,
good.
Essentially now 2 years ago and then last year. They get to the final both years, and Corey Perry was a part of what they were doing well to get to the finals in both those years. And now what? The Kings signed him. They gave him a really good deal.
Well, they did.
So that might not be exactly what you're talking about. Maybe what you're talking about is like, we have a guy. How much are we willing to re-sign him for with what term? And if that player is a forward, we may be looking at less money and or less term than a defenseman.
Well, I think Corey Perry, you bring up a good point, but Corey Perry's also bounced around a tremendous amount of time since he's hit a certain age. And that's probably because people have identified him as, you're not a top 6 anymore. You're probably a bottom 6. And with bottom 6 players, we usually don't lock you up.
Right. So the length of the contract,
so I think that's what it
not
is.
Been
it feels like
long, but he's gotten paid well.
No, he has.
Each year they're giving him a contract. The team that is signing him is offering a contract that,
and that's true.
I mean, it's not like Matthews money,
right?
But it's not the league minimum either.
No, and he's earned it, and I understand that. I think what I'm saying is this might be more about length of contract, how much you're willing to commit to a player.
Yeah.
Because I think you're more inclined to do that with a defenseman than you are a forward. It feels like a forward, once you get to a certain age, unless you're still performing like, let's call it a Sidney Crosby at a very high level where you're a top 6, you're probably still a first-line player. It's harder to lock yourself into term with a player whose play at the forward position is starting to go downhill a bit. Whereas I think defensively, if you were to go to Ryan McDonough and say, I mean, how old is Ryan at this point? He's 30.
He turns 36 this summer.
36.
I can't remember if he's at a birthday yet or not.
Could you
by
imagine
the time next season starts, he'll be 36.
So if somebody went and said, look, we want to lock you up for 3 more years at $5 million.
When he's 37, because he's got this
but
year
like
under contract.
at this point, if you were to say Ryan McDonough is going to play into 40, as a 40-year-old, based off of what we've seen his performance like over the last 2 years, and if you were to say, look, I'm going to give you a 3-year deal, and we're going to front load it, and we feel like you still can play based off of what we've seen from you, you wouldn't be shocked about that. I wouldn't.
No.
But I think if you had somebody who was 36, 37, and their play was eroding pretty quickly at the forward position, and it was time to re-sign them, you're either going a 1-year deal maybe and saying, hey, let's see how this goes, and maybe your role with the team isn't the same, or you're probably moving on from them. I mean, look at Jonathan Toews. Jonathan Toews ended up in Winnipeg, correct?
Yeah.
And what was his new deal? Did
It's
he have a new deal?
It's a little different situation, though, because he had a medical problem that prohibited him from basically playing.
But I don't know if I would have given might have been different because Chicago, let's say, had they been a little bit more competitive, and let's say Toews didn't have do you want to call it the injury issues that he had or that he's run into. But I never looked at Jonathan Toews, and maybe it coincided with injuries, as a guy that was going to be putting prolific offensive numbers up, even in his 32, 33, however what he is now. I'd be more hesitant to give him a long-term deal than I would a guy like Ryan McDonagh. And when I say long-term, you know where I'm coming from. This is more than 1 year. Right. A 3-year is still being paid. So putting a bow on this conversation, do I think these rumors, I don't know where he heard them. There's been some talk. Rumors. I haven't heard it. Does that mean it can't happen? Of course not. We've seen things happen, and Julien Brisebois, out of all, I think, general managers within the NHL, one thing you and I can at least observe and appreciate is that he's willing to make some hard decisions. I mean, look, you made what you thought was a fair offer to Steven Stamkos. Steven Stamkos doesn't like it, and you decide to move on from that. Mm-hmm. And that's a really hard decision that I've got to tell you, I don't think most general managers would make, because I think there's this pressure to keep a player like that for one team. Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
For sure. But Julien...
Doesn't the McDonagh situation feel different, though? It's kind of like McDonagh was away. He really wanted to come back. He does come back. And Julien has been upfront about saying we need to see where we are and what our needs are as a team after we get through this year and figure out how you can fit in. And I think that sort of candor and honesty, I mean, I would think that would be well received, right? It's not that, well, we're trying to get a deal done and we're running into a brick wall. Like, it's been up front, where they are, and assuming McDonagh still wants to finish his career with the Lightning, which sounds like he does, which is why he requested the trade back here from Nashville. Sure. He's going to be open to – he's going to enter this with an open mind. That's what it feels like.
I would agree. But I also think there's numbers there internally that the Lightning are privy to that we aren't, maybe, and organizations are as well, where I think they're able to see, okay, are those numbers in the eye test compatible? And I don't think they would talk about or entertain the idea of negotiating a new contract with Ryan McDonagh if they didn't feel like those internal numbers were decreasing his value as a player. And I'm sure they had that with Steven Stamkos, too. There was a number they weren't willing to go over that said, based off of where these metrics are, how productive you've been, and what we're seeing, here's what we're comfortable giving you. If you want more than that, we're just not going to be able to accommodate you. Mm-hmm. I think with McDonagh, I don't know if those internal numbers have dipped. I'm sure they have.
And also the other difference is that, the cap is going up.
And that helps. And that helps.
It didn't really go up that much.
It didn't.
When Stamkos was in his renegotiation process.
For sure.
Steve just sent us a text.
What did Steve have here? $27 million in cap space next season. Bjorkstrand, McDonagh, and Radish are UFAs. Moser, restricted free agent.
Yeah, and that includes the increase.
Yeah.
In the cap, which is, already set in stone.
Of course.
That it's going to go up.
So just something to think about,
Yeah.
Chafee also UFA. Jilly Vanilli also says Perry has a $2 million salary plus $2 million performance bonuses. How are performance bonuses factored into the salary cap number? That's a good question, because you don't hear too much about that anymore.
Yeah, so I'm probably not the best person to answer this, but I believe that if the performance bonuses force you to exceed the cap, it is allowed, but there is some sort of, and I'll use this word kind of in quotations, there is a penalty the next year. In other words, you have to make the money needs to be baked into the next year's cap number. That's my basic understanding, but I may not have all the particulars.
You are correct,
right
according
on
to
that.
Steve.
All right, Dave is correct.
I love that.
We should have just had Steve answer the question.
Steve is our internal fact checker at Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in the conversation. But that is a good question, because when you talk about bonuses, I feel like it's something you hear more about in maybe the NFL, more so than any other sport, for various reasons.
You ever see the
I'm
movie
sure.
8 Men Out?
Yes.
That's one of the, I mean,
it's great. John Cusack, right?
I like sports. Yeah, I like sports movies.
Yeah.
That is, and for baseball movies, to me, that is right up there near the top, if not the top.
Yeah.
I know other people have their
Shoeless
favorite
Joe,
baseball
right?
movies. Yes. But D.B. Sweeney played Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Yeah.
But there's a scene at the beginning of the movie where their ace pitcher, Eddie Seacott, is like at 29 wins. 29 wins, right? They just pitched every other day. Right? So he goes in to see, they play for the White Sox. So Comiskey is the owner. And he goes in to see Mr. Comiskey. And, like the White Sox basically like benched him for
incredible
the last several starts. So he would, because he had a bonus if he got to 30 wins. So he was at 29, so they were just like, yeah, you're not pitching. So he goes in and was like, hey, I had this bonus and I was at 29 wins. And Comiskey's like, tough, basically. So, I mean, they're setting the stage for why these players, took a cut. Right. I mean, this is a true, it's based on a true story. But, I mean, the true story is that some of the players on the White Sox, agreed to throw or at least affect some of the games in their World Series against Cincinnati for gambling purposes. And they got, at the end of the day, they actually got a fairly small cut. The gamblers made off like bandits, right?
The dad.
But like, why would they do that? Well, one reason why is that their ace pitcher kind of got squeezed out and frozen. Yeah.
Hosed, as they say.
Right.
Didn't they find out that Shoeless Joe, at least based off of his batting average, They felt like maybe he didn't take it, or in a roundabout way, maybe he helped.
This was what was depicted in the movie. Yeah. Shoeless Joe is just like, he doesn't even know what's going on. Like he's just,
well, he couldn't read.
He just goes,
I think he just wanted to play.
He wants to go out and play. He doesn't even know how to not play hard, right?
Right.
But they gave him some. He took some money.
The other thing too is I think they got him a little bit that he knew about it and didn't report it. I think that was part of it. Like, I don't think he physically took the money, and I mean, maybe he did. I don't know if we were ever very clear on it, but I think he hit like 375.
Oh yeah, he had.
He was phenomenal, and John Cusack, who was the third baseman, he also played pretty well. Just based off, again, the movie and just things that you read. But that was pretty interesting. By the way, did you ever watch the sitcom Frasier?
Yeah.
The dad was the manager, right?
Yes.
Yeah, which he was pretty good.
Yeah, they had a great cast.
They did. That was you're right. In terms of baseball movies, between that one and Major League, for me, just gets to go. And Major League is just hilarious because of
Major League is not quite in the same category. They're based on actual events. Although, who knows?
I read, and this is what happens with Facebook. I don't know if anybody else feels like their Facebook feed is just out of control right now with all of these different things that are popping up. Because I think like the algorithm's broke or something like that. So it's picking up on like everything, like pickleball is showing up in my feed. And I'm like, what is going on? But I feel like they had something on Major League, like a breakdown of the movie and how it came about and the different actors. And apparently, and you can go back and check, there's not one footage of Wesley Snipes actually like really swinging the bat or because he really couldn't do it. Like, he was just apparently awful.
That the manager is just so perfectly categorized. He watches because Wesley Snipes played Willie Mays Hayes, right? Like, well, you might run like Mays, but you hit like Bleak.
That's great. That was a great line. That was one.
Maybe they actually watched the actor.
Oh man!
Like, hey, let's add this line for this crusty old manager. Anyway, we went off topic.
That's okay
though.
We're allowed to.
But yes, the performance bonuses in hockey are legitimately like they are paid out. And as Steve confirmed, if you go over the cap because of performance bonuses, you are not in violation of the cap. That money just gets pushed to the next year.
Right.
And you have to account for it.
That is fair. Connor Slove says, please tell us if Geeky is coming back.
Well, coming back, he's under contract.
Yeah, I don't know.
The question is he going to be on the NHL roster? My opinion is yes, but that in some ways is up to Connor Geeky himself. And what kind of a training camp, what kind of preseason is he going to have?
A little bit of an X factor there.
And then what is he going to do once the season starts?
Right. Where is he going to play? Who's he going to play with? If you have conversations with Phil Esposito, I think Phil is a big believer. Partner, would you agree with this, that if you're somebody who was a pretty big scorer, maybe at the junior or particularly at the AHL level, and you come up here and you're buried in a third or fourth line role, not getting many minutes, you're not going to do much. In other words, let me see what you can do.
Though, is there are only so many spots in the
Where
top
are you going to go?
six.
I agree. Where are you going to go?
Point, Gensel, and Kucherov, if they are in a line, they are filling 3 of those top 6 roles. They may not be on the same line, but if they aren't, those 3 players are going to take 3 of those spots. Cirelli and Hagel are taking 2 of the spots.
Yeah.
I mean, unless John Cooper is like, we totally need to revamp how we're going to do this. So if you are like me and you believe that those are 5 of the 6 players that are going to comprise the top 2 lines, that's 1 spot left. We've seen Nick Paul there. Maybe Bjorkstrand goes there. Maybe Geeky goes there. Maybe Gage Gonçalves goes there.
Yep.
I mean, that may be a question that's going to be answered, as we go through training camp about, who is the right fit to be the 6th guy, essentially. So, I mean, the Lightning have a team filled with superstars. So it's hard for Geeky now at 21 to be able to come in and be like, I'm going to be in the top 6. Now, last year when he played with Cirelli and Hagel at the start of the year, he did quite well. And maybe at some point that's going to be his career trajectory. That's where he's going to end up being. But I don't think the Lightning are really in the business of kind of handing a role to a player that they feel hasn't in some way made a case to have that role. And I think Geeky did that based on his training camp and preseason last year.
I would agree.
But now he has to do it again. And he wasn't able to maintain it, which is why he basically finished last year in the minors until the Lightning had injuries, and they called him up.
Steve said you can only have performance bonuses in entry-level contract deals and over players over 35.
Okay.
So that makes some sense.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. A player that's going to be interesting that we didn't get a chance to see because of a serious injury that we found out after the season is Bjorkstrand.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's going to be interesting to see where he's fitting in, who he develops chemistry with, and, of course, on the power play.
Yeah.
Because I think that was the guy it felt like they targeted to really give them that additional scoring partner that they felt like they needed in the regular season, heading into the postseason. And how he comes back, how healthy he is, and how productive he is, I think will be one of, for me, the key ingredients for this Lightning team, because they obviously wanted him. They went out and got him. We loved his shot. We know there's a lot of offensive ability. You're bringing in a guy who's a 20-plus goal scorer, can help on whichever power play unit for sure. And I think who he plays with, ultimately is going to be interesting. And you'll see that the pieces starting to come together. But I think he is even maybe more than Geeky or Gonçalves, because still with those players, you have an idea what they can do, but they're, the book's not written on them yet.
They're growing into they're
still growing
in the NHL.
Yeah. Bjorkstrand, I think what you're going to get from the guy, and maybe those numbers are elevated a little bit more because you're playing with better players, maybe, potentially. But you're getting a 20, 25 goal scorer. In today's NHL, that's a big deal. Are you getting that same production when he comes back healthy? How is he? Because that was a serious injury, what we found out, right, partner?
Yes.
I mean, it was not just a sprained wrist.
No.
There were some other things going on there. So that's going to be something that I check out. William Wilson says, where do you see Geeky slotting in this year? Does he start in the AHL? So that's obviously you can hear Lightning fans wondering what's going to happen with Geeky.
I think he's going to be on the NHL roster. I mean, again, I can go to Puckpedia and look at the forwards they have listed. So currently, and I mean, Puckpedia doesn't know. It's not like Julian is on the phone with Puckpedia and we're like, these are going to be the 15 forwards I think you should list. And the Lightning aren't going to have 15 forwards, 6 defensemen. They're probably going to have 7 defensemen and maybe 14 forwards if they carry 23. So included in this list are Tkachuk and Peltier. I don't know if I mean, Peltier, I think that they are intrigued. And I think he has more to give than what we have seen from him at the NHL level.
Yeah.
Does that mean he's going to start the year with the Lightning? In his mind, he's like, I'm coming in to make the team. He does have NHL experience. Tkachuk has basically been a minor league guy the last couple of years. So if you're going to say like Tkachuk and Peltier are, let's call them bubble guys, and maybe one is replaced by Finley, that was a guy that Julian mentioned, I'm not sure that any of those guys necessarily are ahead of Geeky in terms of a role, right, on the team. So, and the other guy I didn't mention was Holmberg, right? So Holmberg is going to slot in the bottom 6. I think that Geeky makes the team, but as I just said, it's up to him. In other words, I'm looking at this list and I'm like, is he the 15th forward? Where he would be, basically they're going to keep 14 potentially, 14 and 7 and 2 goalies.
Yeah.
And Geeky is number 15 and goes down to the minors. That seems to me less likely. I see Geeky in the top, whatever you wanted that number to be, 13, 14. I think Geeky is in that list. But if he doesn't show the Lightning what they want to see from him, he can go down without clearing waivers, and you need to work on your game more. Kind of like what happened with Gonçalves last year. I mean, he got hurt during training camp, but I mean, we've seen this. Just because you don't start the year in the NHL roster doesn't mean that there's no path back. And the opposite is also true. Just because you start in the NHL roster, as Geeky learned last year, doesn't mean that, you've got a spot for the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. You got to keep producing in terms of producing good play, being productive for the team's goal of doing well and winning games. Sometimes that equates to points. Sometimes it just equates to the role that you were given. So we don't have an answer to that question yet.
We will.
When we get into preseason, see how he does. He had a fantastic preseason last year. It was incredibly impactful and exceeded expectations. And surprisingly, not just for us, but for Lightning management, made the team. He is coming in a way different position this year. He's already proven that he can play at the NHL level. They probably gave him a checklist of these are the things we want you to work on during the offseason. See you in the fall. Let's see how he does. With
the new CBA and preseason games being scaled back, starting, I think, next year, correct?
Yes.
How would that have impacted Connor Geeky this past year if that was implemented? Because for a guy like that, he needed those preseason games. What's interesting, partner? I'm not one for preseason games for obvious reasons. You and I have discussed this over the years. But there are 2 players who have stood out for me in these preseason games, I'd say over the last 5 to 6 years, where their performance really allowed them to make the team on opening night and maybe be, quote-unquote, a breakout candidate. And it was Connor Geeky, who was really, really good. And I think we said, I think he's going to make the team. And Matthew Joseph. Remember the year Matthew Joseph, his rookie year, he was incredible. And I think he played in most of the games. But, I mean, he scored.
His rookie NHL year, though.
His rookie NHL.
He did spend a couple of years in Syracuse. But the year that he made the Lightning, he was very impactful.
He was very impactful. And, I'm assuming a lot played into that. But his performance against NHL players was a big deal. And so, Geeky was the same way. You take those preseason games away, though, for some younger players. That is the downside. What do you end up doing? Do you end up staying a little bit more in the minor leagues before you get called up, get a little bit more seasoning? or do you just throw those younger players into the mix right out of the gate for preseason and strategically rest some of your veterans? It's going to be an interesting situation. That's more for next year. I want to get to Boomer Fitzpatrick. He had many questions. I think we actually got to some of these because he had like 4 or 5. I don't think we've addressed this question, though, partner. He said, John Cooper seems to have his guys. He always has been a big Cirelli guy. Now it seems he's a big Lilleberg guy. Is Cooper's ability to see potential in players part of what makes him so great? Do you think we'll witness a Lilleberg ascension this year, looking back, shaking our head, saying, Coop was right?
I'm not sure that I completely agree with how Boomer characterized that, because I don't think, look, every coach has his guys, but the reason that every coach has his guys is those guys
because they can
have won over the coach. Yeah, it's not like a player comes in for Coop or any coach, and the coach is like, he's my guy. Like the player has to give the coach reason to believe, right? Like reason to have faith that that player is going to perform the way the coach wants. So I think Lilleberg came up and played well and earned trust. Now, that's why I'm not sure I would characterize it as like Cooper's guy, because let's remember, Lilleberg was scratched last year. He wasn't scratched often.
He was,
but he was scratched.
His play was inconsistent at times.
Yeah, like
we know that.
Was a young guy learning the game, but the Lightning have invested in him. Mm-hmm. I mean, not just financially invested, but like invested in that they're giving him time and reps at the NHL level because they believe that he will continue to grow and progress. So that's how I look at it. Coop definitely likes the guys that he likes. And, when we saw when he came up from Norfolk / Syracuse, when he was first promoted to the NHL level, the guys that had played for him in Syracuse, not all of them, and Norfolk. I mean, Syracuse, he was there for a portion of 1 year and then he came up. But the guys that had played for him in the minors, like he had allegiance to them.
Yeah.
But the allegiance only went so far as, can they actually do the same thing for me at the NHL level?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you remember Mark Barberio, Greg?
I do.
He was, I want to say he was the AHL Defenseman of the Year, playing under Coop for Norfolk, the year that Norfolk won the Calder Cup. So, like, go to the well. Barberio, you're out there. He was a very good offensive defenseman. Mark Barberio did not have the same impact at the NHL level, including with the Lightning. He bounced around a little bit after that. So it's not like Coop was like, Mark Barberio is one of my guys. Mm-hmm. He did it for me in the minors. He's going to do it for me at the NHL level. Coop is one of the many, many reasons why John Cooper is one of the best coaches in the NHL and going to go into the Hall of Fame is that, like, he's nimble enough to understand, like, what he is getting from a player at that moment in time and at that level. So, like, Tyler Johnson and Andre Palat, who were Coop's guys, when they won the Calder Cup, continued to be Coop's guys because when they came up, they were producing and they were doing many of the same things that they were doing effectively at the minor league level. So, again, I'm not disagreeing kind of with what Boomer is saying. Boomer is like, Cirelli is a really good player and, Coop trusts him, and it looks like Lilleberg is a guy that Coop trusts as well. Lilleberg is not in the same spot that Cirelli is in right now, but there's a reason why Lilleberg spent last year on the NHL roster and came up, remember the year before, and the Lightning called up all these defensemen, and like some of them stuck, some of them didn't, some of them were up and down. Crozier was in the mix there, but part of it was that Lilleberg is a lefty, Crozier is a righty. Last year, the Lightning had a preponderance of righties. But there is a reason beyond that Lilleberg was the guy that stuck, right? The Lightning and John Cooper specifically saw something from him. So from that standpoint, I agree. I don't think Coop just is like, this is one of my guys, so I'm just going to stick with him come hell or high water. The player has to earn Coop's trust and faith.
I'll tell you a few players, but it coincides with they were good players. But Could you say they were Coop players? Probably. Tyler Johnson, Andre Palat, Alex Killorn. He won with
all
those
of them
guys.
played for him in the minors.
And he won with those guys, but they performed at the NHL level. But he gave them, could you say he gave Tyler Johnson a little bit more rope towards the end of his career with the Lightning than somebody else who wasn't aligned with him throughout? Maybe. Killorn's production never really dipped too much. In fact, he got better with age. And Palat was somebody who I think just, financially, you knew that was going to be a tough one. But John Cooper would often talk glowingly about if you had a roster full of Andre Palats, you'd be doing pretty good. Yeah. And it's hard to disagree with a lot of that. So that would be, I think you summed up pretty well there, partner. But that's kind of where we are with some of these players in Lilleberg who, look, I think having Crozier up here too, if that ends up being a pairing, let's see how that plays out. Lastly, Boomer asks, what can you tell us of how Camp Cooch is going? Are players other than Kucherov back on the ice?
I confess, and I don't live far from the TGH Iceplex, I confess I have not been over there very often, but I did see Mitchell Chafee at a TGH event that the Lightning were involved in. I was there, and Chafee said, he's going, but he did tell me anecdotally, Chafee did, that many of the players that, seemed to be at the TGH Iceplex shortly after the season ended have headed off for wherever their summer destination is. But Chafee was staying in town. So I think Chafee is going regularly. I don't know how many other players are doing it. Other than Cooch, who is clearly there most, if not all days.
He's what we call a gym rat, right?
Yeah,
Just so much time. And I think skilled guys, too, you can do certain things with the puck, with the stick that aren't as strenuous as somebody who's just, more of a meat and potato guy, and, it's about positioning and things like that. I mean, you can work on your stick handling, your shot, different angles. I mean, how many times have we seen Kucherov try things? I mean, this is where he's practicing it. Yeah. Getting ready for the off season or getting ready for the season to begin here. So that's kind of where we are. Well, what did we say? This was our last show until
Steve,
when
do we have
a
return date so people can mark their calendars?
We can do a countdown.
That set?
We can do a countdown.
We know it's September 18th.
September 18th. Okay.
I think is that the day after Media Day? Is that right? I think Media Day might be the 17th.
So, yes. So we'll have a lot to talk about. For sure.
And that'll be coming on the heels of that. Now I know the name, the Prospect Showcase.
Yeah.
Which is going to be taking place at the Wesley Chapel facility. I'm guessing.
That'll be fun.
There was a time when they had a game or two at Amalie, because I did one of those games. You did some games a few years ago, didn't you?
I think a couple years back. Yeah.
That was at Wesley Chapel, right?
It's actually funny. I who's the kid from Nashville who's now with Tomasino?
Yeah.
I think he was playing for Nashville at the time. I think Jarvis might have been playing for Carolina. That's why Carolina saw him up close, and I was like, hey, this guy's gonna be pretty good. It's interesting. But
concert in Amalie during the time frame. All the games will be at Wesley Chapel.
Who's playing?
Thank you, Steve.
Who's playing, Steve? I'm going to put you on your toes. Is it Rod Stewart and the Faces?
Lightning fans will choose to go see the Prospect Showcase over the concert in Amalie Arena. Don't remember. Right. Obviously.
With us doing a pregame.
He's worried about Lightning dates, not
I know, Steve.
Who's playing music at Amalie. But you have a good couple of months.
Yeah. Gonna, kids are gonna be, as you know, I mean, this time around, grade school, high school, starting back up, and
I'm taking 2 kids up to college in a month.
Man, time is flying.
Yeah. Well, this is the first year that we're taking both kids.
Yeah. So you're gonna have an empty home outside of the dogs and the animals,
outside of Dulcie and all the animals. Yes, it will be completely empty.
Well, your kids aren't that noisy though. Your kids are good kids.
No,
they're not. They're
really
not troublemakers.
No.
So.
Well, you're gonna be pining for the time when Enzo is squawking for you when your kids reach the age where they just barricade themselves in the room.
That does happen though, right?
From them.
That does happen. That does happen.
Well,
Partner,
not with my kids aren't identical in that regard, but they both do like spending time, and they have their own boy and a girl, so they have separate rooms, but they spend a fair amount of time in their individual rooms with the door closed. They still hang out with us a little bit, but it's different
they
than when
grace
they were
you with-
like 6 and 7.
Right. I get that. Yeah. Now it's like, hey, Dad, will you cuddle with me? Come on, Dad. Now it's me, Dad. Get
You
the hell out of
hopefully
here.
will be graduating from diapers soon. I'm not quite sure.
Hopefully.
I've kind of lost track of where you are in that trajectory. But that is I'm going to get you a little certificate when that happens, and be like, congratulations.
Yep.
Diaper purchase is done. Not there yet, though. Huh?
Be a big expense gone away.
Yes.
Which will be great. All right, partner. Well, you have a great rest of the summer. I'm sure we'll be in touch, Steve, as well, and everybody else who's been listening to us. We appreciate you guys. We do.
Thanks to all the fans.
Yeah, and
we'll talk to you in
soon.
September.
It'll happen. It'll be here sooner rather than later, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But until then, you've been listening to another edition of Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.